There are over 10,000 cards in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game. From Pot of Greed to Firewall Dragon, the possibilities are endless. In this series, can your favorite content creators figure out what card I'm thinking of? I've got $100, and they've got 10 questions. It could literally be anything. Welcome to Guess That Card. My name is Alex Cimoooooooo, and I have ulcerative colitis. Ulcerative colitis is a chronic inflammatory disease that affects the lining of the colon, causing the formation of small sores and ulcers, as well as a plethora of debilitating symptoms. I've lived with this miserable disease for 15 years, and there does not yet exist a cure. That's why for the month of December, I'm helping raise both money and awareness for the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation so that no one has to suffer like I have. For every milestone achieved through your donations, I'll be making dedicated videos for your enjoyment. All proceeds will go directly to the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. Click the links down below to donate now and to learn more about my story with ulcerative colitis. Together, we will find a cure. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time to guess that card. With us today, one of my other lovely co-hosts, the one and only Mr. RJB0. Robert, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing excellently, Alex. I'm feeling great coming off of another item in the win streak for Sealed Showdown.
Yeah. You just have to brag about it. You just have to brag about it. What is this, a 4-win streak, 5-win streak?
I think it's only 3. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You know, you can predict that for our next 2 sets as well.
By the time this video goes live, you'll probably be on an 11-win streak at this rate. But you know, in any case, I'm going to try and make sure that that doesn't happen. But that's not what we're here for today. We are here for you to be guessing cards and possibly winning yourselves $100. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready to play.
All right, you've got 10 yes or no questions to throw my way to try to narrow down that thousands upon thousands of cards. Let's go ahead and see what your first question is.
My first question is it a monster?
Yes, it is a monster.
So that question worked out great for me. That automatically cut out 2/3 of the card pool right there.
Fantastic.
But narrowing down monsters is a little bit more of a process. Is this card normal summonable without a tribute?
Is this card normal summonable without a tribute? Is that your question?
That is my question.
No.
It is not normal summonable without a tribute. That gives us 2 options. It either must be special summoned or it is a high level tribute summonable monster, which narrows down the pool slightly less than I expected, but there's a large pool of lower level monsters. This also doesn't help me much with choosing my filters, but is great for determining my next question.
And I will give you a little bit of help. Your guess for what the card is does not count as a question. So you'll go through all 10 and then you will guess.
Is this monster housed in the extra deck?
Yes. That should narrow things down quite a bit for you.
It does. There are only 4 types it could be then.
So that narrows it down to like, what, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 cards?
That's true. That is true. My guess is that this is a card. You would give me a card that I like at least know the name of ahead of time.
I could. If I'm, sadistic, also, I could not.
I know. You could also be making the salty run back on me here and trying to catch me on this one.
I was going to say, if I want to be spiteful from Sealed Showdown, then yes, that's exactly what I would do.
I think my next plan, I'm of 2 minds about this. I can either spend a few questions trying to get down to what type of extra deck monster it is. I could get a general time period when I expect this card to come from. If the answer is yes, then it's gotta be not a link monster, and also is more likely to be a monster that I know well. If the answer is no, then that really, really narrows down the potential pool. Also, the meme question I could ask, which is, has it come up on Sealed Showdown?
That is true. That is true. There have been several people in the past that have had very unique yes or no questions that are allowed. If it's a yes or no question, I will answer it.
I have a question that can significantly narrow this down.
Okay.
I have a question that potentially halves the number of monsters this could be and cuts out 2 summoning mechanics. Is the border for this monster a neutral color, which would be black or white.
Is the border of this card a neutral color, which in this case you're saying, is it black or white?
Correct.
That's the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that gives me Xyz or Synchro, and I have 6 questions left.
Correct. So far, you know it's a monster that is not normal summonable without a tribute. It is a monster housed in the extra deck, and it has a neutral, or in this case, black or white border.
My next question is, my 5th question, is it a Synchro monster?
Yes.
Okay, all right, we have something to work with here. So now I have a filter that I can rely on.
And you're halfway through. That was your 5th question. You got your 6th one coming up, and making some progress here. Making some progress.
We are making some progress. Now, there are some really weird gimmicky questions that I can go for here. There are things like, does the name begin with a vowel? There are things, is it a part of an archetype? There are things like, is it part of an archetype is probably a largely useless question at this point because like all the stuff that I would think of like, yeah, Stardust Dragon, Stardust is now an archetype. There's also, I could narrow things down by asking about the release date. I could ask if it was released during 5Ds.
I will say as well, all of these different lines that you're possibly considering taking are questions or routes that other contestants have taken too. Now, whether it was good or bad for them, I'm not at liberty to say.
A really important question there. Was this Synchro monster released in the 5Ds era?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That narrows things down considerably. That gives me a grand total of 5 pages on Dueling Book.
In all fairness, I mean, that's only 100 cards.
No, I lied. It's 7 pages. Oh, well.
Oh, it's 140, but still. So at this point, Robert, you've basically, in 6 questions, figured out that it's a 5D synchro monster.
Yes. So there's a way that I could go here that narrows it down in an interesting way, which is it in the 5Ds anime? I'm not sure that that helps me as much as I want it to. Looking through these cards, the only things that aren't really anime-related cards, we've got like the Scraps and the Hidden Arsenal archetypes are pretty much what we have available to us.
So that takes out like 10 cards.
Not many. Yeah, that is correct. It's not a useful question.
But if you're right, you have it down to 10 cards at that point.
That's true. That's true. Okay. One route that I can go down that I think is really interesting is to start asking about the levels of the card.
Okay.
The reason why I think that that's a good route to go is because most of the cards that I think you would think of are higher level synchros. And if they're not, the really low level synchros are a very narrow pool. So if I were to ask about it being an 8, that gives me a much smaller pool of monsters to work. If I ask it's an 8 and it's not though, then I have to ask, will a 6 or a 7 be the more likely thing? And then I start really burning questions.
I can spoil for you. Usually around this point is where the contestants start maybe chucking for some Hail Marys, because depending on how narrow the pool is, they might be getting desperate enough that they have to.
Thought number 1 is to start thinking about levels. Thought number 2 is to ask about if it's come up on Sealed Showdown, like if it's been summoned on Sealed Showdown. There's also a world where I start asking about typing, because the majority of synchros in this era are either dragon or warrior, but if it's not one of those two, I've burned 2 questions for no reason.
You could also just ask all those questions anyway and burn 2 questions for no reason.
That's true. You're right. I could.
You can have it all.
Has it come up on Sealed Showdown? And when I say come up, I mean, has it been summoned on Sealed Showdown?
That's your question.
That is my 7th question.
Yes.
Ooh, okay. That cuts out a lot of
It
cards.
does. That was a very gutsy question of you to ask.
It was a very gutsy question. So this gives me 3 left. I'm going to change my die to a 3 instead of a 6. So it has been summoned on Sealed Showdown. Now that is a very, very important question, because that cuts out things like Stardust Dragon. Stardust Dragon did not get summoned on Sealed Showdown. It cuts out Red Dragon Archfiend, which was also not summoned on Sealed Showdown. It doesn't cut out Black Rose Dragon, because I did summon that card in Sealed Showdown. It sucked ass, but I did summon it.
We're not trying to summon things in Sealed Showdown to win. We're trying to summon them for style points. So just to quickly recap, 7 questions in. This is your 8th question coming up. All your questions combined, you know that is a synchro monster in the 5Ds era that has been summoned in Sealed Showdown, which has narrowed the pool down significantly because of that 7th question hit. I think had that been wrong, I don't think you would have really made much headway. You would have made a little bit, but I think hitting it was more beneficial to you than not.
There are a couple of ways I can go. Again, I think level is an interesting question, and I think type is an interesting question, and I think who summoned it.
You have 3 questions. You could ask all 3.
True, but I can't ask them like that because the type is a question, or if the answer is no, then I haven't gained much. And the same goes for level.
Oh, I didn't care about whether or not you're gaining much. I just said you could ask them.
Oh, I'm sure you don't care about that. Now, an interesting thought experiment here is what cards from Sealed Showdown have I not summoned? So those are things like Iron Chain Dragon, I didn't get to play. I don't think I got to play Psychic Life Trancer. You were the one with Go-Yo Guardian. There's also like Queen of Thorns, which you were the one who played. We've both played Turbo Warrior. I'm the only one who's had Armor Master. I don't remember if I ever summoned Armor Master, but I know I had it. My 8th question is, was it summoned in a Duelist Pack episode?
Yes.
That narrows it down significantly because the options now are actually nameable. We've got Junk Warrior, Stardust Dragon, Nitro Warrior, Turbo Warrior, and Armory Arm is another option. And then Road Warrior, let's see, and then Junk Archer. Those are our options. That's
what, like 10, 15?
Yeah, that is not a large number of cards to have to work with.
You still have 2 questions to narrow it down? Looks like your odds are looking pretty good.
So here's where the level question becomes a big one, because level 8 would mean it was either Road Warrior or Stardust Dragon. Level 7 would mean it's either Nitro Warrior or Junk Archer. And 6 means it's either Turbo Warrior or Drill Warrior. And the only one that would be any level other than that is either Junk Warrior, Armory Arm. Now, Junk Warrior would be a hot choice for you because you know that it is one of my 2 favorite cards ever printed.
So far, Robert, you know it was a 5Ds era synchro monster, summoned on Sealed Showdown, and of note, summoned in a Duelist Pack episode. What is your 9th question?
Yeah, I think the question, my 9th question is it a light/dark monster?
No.
No. Okay. That's a tough one. So my options now are exactly as follows. Nitro Warrior, Turbo Warrior, Stardust Dragon, Junk Archer, and Drill Warrior. So the question, is it a warrior, doesn't help me much. All of them but Stardust are warriors. I'm just making up numbers of cards. I think I've said like a bunch of different totals, none of which are correct.
It seems to me here that unless you get extraordinarily lucky with whatever your final question is, it's not going to be a 50-50.
I get really, really good options to work with because I think there's a really narrow pool of monsters you will have thought of for this quiz. I think the monsters you will have thought of for the purpose of this quiz are Drill Warrior because it just railed you in our most recent Duelist Pack episode.
Thank you for reminding me.
Stardust Dragon because it's the most iconic monster of 5Ds. And Nitro Warrior because it's the most legendary monster from Sealed Showdown. Which gives us a warrior, and a dragon, and an earth, a wind, and a fire. What else does that give us to work with?
I was about to say, that's also assuming it's just those 3 cards, because from my understanding, there are other cards it could be.
It could be other cards. I have 1 question left, and unless I can think of a hella good question, then I have to be thinking, what cards would you have thought of for the purpose of this quiz? I have to be trying to get in your mind for this last one.
Other co-hosts have tried to do similarly at this point, and literally would just look through the cards and say, you didn't pick this, you didn't pick this. And again, I'm not at liberty to say as to whether or not it worked for them, but it is a route that they have taken. All right, Robert, you know it's a 5Ds era synchro monster that was summoned on Sealed Showdown in a Duelist Pack episode that is not light or dark. Do you have your 10th question?
I have a really niche question. The easy question here is it a warrior monster? That leaves me with the two options, probably Drill Warrior or probably Nitro Warrior. The other way that I could do this is I could ask if it was released in Duelist Pack Yusei 1. Would I rather have to eliminate between Nitro Warrior and Drill Warrior, Nitro Warrior and Stardust, or Stardust and Drill Warrior? I think I would prefer to eliminate between Drill Warrior and anything else. This is going to be my last question, my 10th question.
Okay.
Is it a warrior monster?
No.
It's Stardust Dragon.
Yes! Correct!
Hell
you
yeah!
guys, you won $100 on Guess That Car! Oh my god, I was like, please make it go down to Stardust and Nitro Warrior or Stardust and Drill Warrior, because you were gonna run in circles, never letting yourself live down if you got that incorrect. So,
That's
my god.
That's exactly it. My thinking was I would rather have to eliminate between Drill Warrior and anything else. And so if I could eliminate Stardust Dragon, then the answer was going to be Nitro Warrior. If I could eliminate Nitro Warrior and Drill Warrior, then obviously, or if I could eliminate Nitro Warrior, the answer was going to be Stardust. Is it a warrior was the question that guaranteed to give me that 50-50 question. Oh boy! It took me all of that to guess the most iconic card in 5Ds.
That's all it took. That's all it took. But you did get it in 10 questions. Congratulations. But we're not done, Mr. RJB0, because how would you like to double down and try your chance at $200 by guessing another card that I'm thinking of?
Oh no. My brain barely survived the first round. $100 gets me an OCG Ghost Rare Stardust. So that's a real thought.
But $200 get you 2 OCG Ghost Rare Stardust.
Or like halfway toward a beat up TCG Ghost Rare Stardust.
There you go. There you go.
All right, let's do it.
He's running it, ladies and
Let's
gentlemen.
do it.
He's going for it again.
All
Let's
right.
go ahead and set up for round 2.
Back to dueling book.
All right, Robert, round 2. Guess that card. $200 on the line. You have a set of 10 fresh questions you can ask. Get to it, my friend. What's question number 1 going to be?
All right. I think my first question from last round was a winner. Is it a monster?
Yes, it is a monster.
Is it an extra deck monster?
No, it is not an extra deck monster.
Okay, so not an extra deck monster. So that makes the next questions a little bit more interesting, doesn't it? We're starting with monsters. So we're either working with effect monsters or normal monsters. It could be pendulum monsters. That's also an option, I suppose.
Yeah, not going to be so easy for you this time.
No, it isn't.
It's $200. It has to be a bit more challenging.
So there's a lot that I could do here. Asking if it's an effect monster is not a great question unless the answer is no, in which case it turns out to be a phenomenal question.
That's like every question on this show.
That's true. I think there's a set of questions that are the reliable questions. Those are the ones that you can expect to eliminate about half the pool, right? That's where you want to get with your most general questions. And then there are the riskier questions. Those are the ones where if the answer goes one way, it's like you're absolutely certain that you've eliminated a bunch of things. But if the answer goes another way, you're not quite as sure. Okay, is it normal summonable without tribute? That is my third question.
Yes.
Okay, that means that it is maximum level 4, or it is exactly Sirocco or Power Invader.
Only the sealed showdown strat.
God, I should have just asked, is it level 4 or lower? I don't know why I was trying to go around that, but this does mean it's a monster that can be normal summoned. So it's not a special summon only monster, which tells me it's not something like the baby Chaos Dragons. It is not something like, and I think that pool is wider than the pool of monsters that are level 5 or higher that have an effect that allow you to normal summon it without tribute. And to be clear, I mean without the addition of card effects that are not that monster's effect. Well, if you have Mausoleum of the Emperor up, then you can normal summon anything without tribute.
I think you're really overthinking it if you're starting to involve Mausoleum of the Emperor in any debate.
You can never overthink you, Alex Simo. Was it released in or after Duelist Alliance? That is my fourth question.
No.
Okay, that means it's not a pendulum monster, and that means it was released in the Arc, or not in the Arc 5 era. It was released in Zexal 5D's GX or DM.
Making some headway. Making some headway.
This is a time when it may be like more useful for me to ask the question, is it an effect monster only? Because asking that precludes a lot of different things. It precludes a tuner. A number of the cards I think you would think of would be tuners. It precludes normal monsters. It precludes spirits and unions. Just a lot of things, but it still leaves me with a large number of effect monsters to work with. Okay, my fifth question is it an effect monster only?
Yes.
Okay, now we're talking. So it is a level 4 or lower effect monster.
Correct. That was your fifth question. You know it's a monster that's not an extra deck monster, normal summonable without tribute, not released in or after Duelist Alliance, and is an effect monster only. 5 more questions to go, $200 on the line. The problem now is that you have to sift through every single effect monster in Yu-Gi-Oh! Essentially pre-Duelist Alliance.
That is true. Now, what is the approach that narrows it down beyond that? There are things I could ask, like I said, is it a card you associate me with? There are questions about attribute, like I could do the is it a light or dark monster thing again. That eliminates a lot of things, but doesn't really get me in a useful direction. Of course, that's just kind of the nature of any question in this game. Guaranteed is a 50-50. The risky questions are going to be things that can narrow it down a lot or may not give you much information at all. I'm gonna go for the risky question here.
Okay, I'm down.
Is it a card that you associate with me? Like a card from a deck you know me to play, a card that like I talk about a lot?
No.
Okay. That's why it was a risky question.
Could definitely have paid off if it was yes, though. I could see your logic.
Yes.
This is your 7th question coming up, Mr. Robert. 4 left before you have to give your guess.
One question that I think is an interesting way to go with this is asking if it's like a good card. Like if it's one that was used fairly regularly in the competitive scene. It's a little bit subjective, but it gives me a little better idea of the vein that you're thinking in, because I think you and I have relatively similar ideas of what like constitute like competitively viable cards.
I think one other co-host has asked something similar before. Actually, no, a few. A couple have asked that before. Or something along those lines. Maybe not worded the way you worded it.
One way that I could ask something similar that potentially gives me a much narrower pool is, was it in a deck that you remember on History of Yu-Gi-Oh?
I like how you're going for all of the different like series videos for this. It's fascinating.
The reason history, so the first one I figured you were like going for something that would like made sense to the two of us.
Okay,
right?
Sure.
The second one, since you're being more tricky, you're probably, the reason History of Yu-Gi-Oh is useful to me is because cards that were on History of Yu-Gi-Oh are not only competitively viable cards for the most part, some of them are, but they're from most of the most iconic decks.
Sure.
And so if the answer is yes, there's a lot that I can narrow down from that. There are also a bunch of like super safe 50-50 questions, like is it a light or dark monster? Is the level even?
You also have 4 questions still, you know, you don't have to limit yourself.
If the answer is no to is the level even, that's pretty big. 4s and 2s is a huge group of monsters, but if the answer is yes, I will have learned very little. I think my 7th question is going to be, was it released before the beginning of 5Ds?
Was it released before the beginning of 5Ds? For your 7th question?
That's my 7th question.
Yes.
Ooh, okay. Now the question of was it a competitively viable card becomes significantly narrower, because cards released before 5Ds sucked ass. And so if it was a competitively viable card, that reduces my pool a large amount. If it wasn't, is it an anime card is also a really useful question. That deals with a large number of things.
Yeah, a few people have asked that before. And just to quickly recap your questions that you've asked so far, you know it's a monster that's not an extra deck monster, It's normal summonable without tribute, not released in or after Duelist Alliance. It is an effect monster only, not a card I associate with you playing. It was released before the beginning of 5Ds.
Not a card you associate with me playing is a really interesting wrinkle in this, depending on what the answers are to the next couple of questions. I think the question that gives me the most to work with next is, was the card competitive when it came out?
No.
Now we have some interesting things to go with. Is it an anime card? Becomes a much more useful question now.
Okay.
Was it played on Sealed Showdown? Is probably not as useful a question still, because you already answered that you don't associate it with me. I think...
No, not necessarily, because I mean, I could still associate it with you. You said associate with you playing it, like that you're known for playing it. So I think the Sealed Showdown question is still like on the table for all intent. I'll help clarify that slightly. The way you worded it when you asked it is you said, is it something that is synonymous with you, was my interpretation of that. Okay. And I said no to that. So just in case you want to keep that option on the table, I will help clarify that for you.
So it was not competitively viable. And I have 2 questions left.
Correct. You said not competitively viable when it came out specifically as well.
When it came out. That's important because that eliminates things like barrier statues that sucked ass until like 10 years later.
Cyberdark Impact, still a great set. I will die on that hill.
I'm in much more trouble than I was before.
I will say, you at this point, you had it down to about 5-10 cards. This time, it is much different. That's not to say that people have or have not gotten their guess by this point, but you know, it's possible.
I think, is it an anime card is a less useful question than I want it to be. The reason why is because they also played, I'm looking through these cards, they played a lot of garbage in both animes.
Yes, they did.
Just a lot of terrible cards. This is another situation where is it from an archetype might help. There are a lot of like really bad cards that were from like the first set of archetypes. Has it come up on History of Jank? That is not, to be clear, that is not yet my question.
You sure about that? That sounds like a good question to me.
It's a pretty good question.
I don't think that helps you at all.
I think my 9th question is it an anime card? That's my 9th question.
Is it an anime card? To clarify, is it a card that is in the anime?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Your 9th question, Robert. You have one more before you have to make your guess. For
anime cards, actually, the more I'm thinking about it, narrows things down a lot. I think there are about a quarter of the cards on each of these pages that was an anime card.
Okay. So that was actually a pretty good hit then.
There's nothing that gets me down to like a useful number here. Is it from an archetype is still a really good one because that gives you things like Gravekeepers, it gives you things like Guardians. Of those, I think I know what I would answer, but there are a lot of things.
You are also pre-5Ds. I don't envy your position, buddy. This is a tough one.
This is another situation where, like, is it a card we summon, like we used in Sealed Showdown? You know, we've played a lot of garbage.
Yes, we have. That also has interesting crossover with some of the other questions that you've asked.
So a really interesting question is what effect monsters might you have thought of from GX? I feel like that's a really low number of cards. There are not many anime effect monsters from GX that I think you would have thought of that fit into the answers to this question. I'm going to take a look through those first because I think that gives me useful information.
So you have a hunch it's from GX then. You're ruling out DM.
So the reason I'm going to GX is because GX, I feel like an anime card that you would think of that fits in this category would pop out more from GX. So if I don't see that, then I think it is less likely to be from GX than from DM.
Interesting. Okay.
Which changes the questions I think I would ask.
Fair point.
Let's see. Drillroid was competitively viable. Soitsu Doitsu were not, but they're also not anime cards to my knowledge. There are some things I think you would think of.
What are you thinking, buddy?
From the GX anime. I'm thinking like the elemental energy era things that I'm looking at are things from the anime.
Such as?
Such as Helios, The Primordial Sun, I think, is something you would think of, or one of the Helios cards. Is it a hero monster? If it is, I think, so the thing that's hitting me as I'm getting later into GX, man, oh man, are the Destiny heroes things I think you would think of that are really bad anime effect monsters. And I think the thing you would think of from those is Doomlord. So I think that it's worth filing that potential one away.
Interesting. You only have one question left, keep in mind. So
I do. What do I think would pop out to you from DM? Can't be Exodia or Maneater Bug. Those cards were FTKs, like literally in the case of Exodia on release. Jirai Gumo, I think, was competitive, although I'm not sure that people played it on release, but in the format that it's in, Critter format, it is competitive. I think the Hail Mary question here, the one that's most likely to give me is, was it from GX? Is that my question? Well, what do I do? What do I do if the answer is no? The answer is I cry. But at this point, I think I have to go for the Hail Marys because I think that there's nothing that I can ask that gives me like a 50-50 that's useful for me. Yeah, the question is it from GX?
yes.
My answer is Destiny Hero Doom.
I don't know how you got it, but congratulations! You won $200! Yes! Guess that card, Robert!
Holy shit!
As soon as you said it, I was making faces in the camera. I'm like, no fucking way. He's narrowed it down out of thin air to get that. That is unbelievable. I'm like, there's so many other cards you could have picked. And yes, like, obviously, anyone who's seen the Sealed Showdown with Enemy of Justice, don't watch it. It's miserable. It's 2 hours long. We have history with that card. But I was like, there's no shot he's going to figure this out. And, like, out of thin air, you're like, oh, it's Doomlord. Okay. I'm like, whatever. I can't even be mad. Like, that's amazing.
You know, I was like, Duelist Pack, Aster Phoenix, be my guide. I had to rely on the trauma from that episode to carry me through.
As soon as you got to like question 8 or 9, I'm like, well, looks like I'm keeping my money. And then out of nowhere comes Doomlord. Like 2 turns later in the standby phase, I got banished. And here we are. Oh my God. I'm so happy for you. I cannot believe you got it.
Oh, thank you, buddy.
That is incredible. Out of thousands upon thousands of cards, you narrowed it down not once, but twice in 10 guesses to guess the card. That is amazing. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling shocked, honestly, but at the same time, my heart is like, this is correct. There's nothing it could have come from except Duelist Pack Aster Phoenix. And from Aster Phoenix, there is no card it could have been except the one card that ruined our lives for 5 hours that night, which is Destiny Hero Doomlord. It's just, the universe is right.
Oh my God. And it ruined our night again for another couple of hours here. But I mean, how fitting, right? It wouldn't be anything but Doomlord in that case. But congratulations, buddy. You are one of the few competitors that has actually won not one, but both rounds on the show. So maybe in the future, if there's like a Champions edition, you'll have to be invited back on. But thank you all so much for watching another episode of Guess That Card. Be sure to let me know down in the comments who else you want to see featured on the show. And we will see you next time. So guys, that's going to wrap it up for another video. I really hope you all enjoyed. Let's go ahead and shout the patrons for all of their continued support. So shoutouts to Shadow1317, Tim00x3, Moto, MBT Play Madolce, Cameron Smith, Pony Stark, Par 2, The Synchro Guy, Dan the Man Hoban, Phoenix the Immortal, Dixon Yamada, Draconic, Jordan Coods, Iron Bladesman, Jesse Wood, Chris Hood, Valen Jackson, Dylan Hunter, Little Fade Leaf, Cody Brett's Extremely Vulgar Man, Brody Eastwood, Carlos DT, Flannel Daddy, Hornet, Indian Atai Show, Thanks for the Sleeves Dad, Max, Matthew Brady, Twinkle Muncher, Luabon, Yodabon, Eater of Crayons, Helios 515, Simo's Chaos Cooking Draft, Simping for Simo, Cheeks McLapperty, Dalton, Stolfin Amethyst, Nim Noodle, Malabranch of the Burning Tunnels, Wonder Waffle, MBT canceled by all community soon, canceled by all committee soon, canceled by all players soon, Yus, Unis the Bus, Shrugzix, the Crystal Beast Enthusiast, ITF, Corvain, and True Dragon Gaming. Thank you all so much for watching the video, and we will see you next time.